The King Midas and the Golden Touch. Many years ago, there was a rich king named Midas. The king grew so fond of gold, better than anything else in the whole world. One day, while he was in his gold room, a fairy boy appeared in front of him. The fairy's face shone with a wonderful light, and he had wings on his back. "King Midas, you are the richest man in the world," said the fairy boy. "There is no king who has as much gold as you do."
Of course I have the most gold in the world,
boasted the king.
"But I want much more, for gold is the best and the most wonderful thing in the world."
"Are you sure?" asked the fairy boy.
"I am very sure,"
answered the king. "If I should grant you one wish," said the fairy boy, "would you ask for more gold?"
"If I could have one wish,"
said the king,
"I would ask that everything I touch should turn into beautiful yellow gold."
"Your wish shall be granted," said the fairy boy. "At sunrise tomorrow morning, your slightest touch will turn everything into gold. But I warn you that your gift will not make you happy."
"I will take the risk,"
said the king. The next day, King Midas awoke very early. He wanted to see if the fairy's promise had come true. As soon as the sun arose, he tried the gift by touching the bed lightly with his hand. The bed turned into gold. He touched the chair and table. Instantly, they changed into solid gold. The king was wild with joy. He ran around the room, touching everything he could see. His magic gift turned everything he touched into shining yellow gold. The king was hungry, and he went down to eat his breakfast. But when he lifted a glass of clear, cold water to drink, it became solid gold. Not a drop of water could pass his lips. The bread turned to gold under his fingers. The meat was hard, yellow, and shiny. The king was not able to eat anything. Everything he touched was gold, gold, and gold. The king's little daughter came in from the garden. Without thinking, the king gently kissed her. At once, the little girl transformed into a golden statue. A great fear crept into King Midas's heart, sweeping all the joy out of his life. In his grief, the king called out loudly for the fairy who had given him the gift of the golden touch.
"Help! Help! Oh, fairy,"
he begged,
"please take away this horrible golden gift. Take all my lands. Take all my gold. Take everything. Only give me back my little daughter."
In a moment, the fairy boy appeared and asked, "Do you still think that gold is the greatest thing in the world?"
"No, no,"
cried the king.
I can't stand the sight of the golden stuff.
Are you sure that you no longer wish for the golden touch? Asked the fairy.
I have learned my lesson,
Said the king.
I no longer think that gold is the greatest thing in the world.
Very well, said the fairy. Take this pitcher to the spring in the garden and fill it with water. Then sprinkle the things you have touched. Midas took the pitcher and rushed to the spring. As soon as he returned, he sprinkled his dear little girl. Instantly, she became his own sweet daughter again and gave him a kiss. The king sprinkled his food, and to his great joy, it turned back to real bread and butter. Then the king and his little daughter sat down to have breakfast. How good the cold water tasted! How eagerly the hungry king ate the good food! Ever since then, King Midas became a better king, generous and grateful for all goods in his life.
The Power of Bees, written by Curtis Norris. In a deep forest, honeybees build their hive on an old tree branch. They are very hard-working, sucking nectar all day to build their hive and make honey. They work hard together and have fun. There is a bee named Stripey. He is very strong. Stripey always thinks he is the best and fastest of all the bees. He is very proud of himself. Stripey puffs his chest and says, "In half a day, I can collect as much nectar as all the other bees in a full day. I don't like working with slow bees." So he always goes alone, never working with his friends. One day, Stripey flew to find nectar. Because he flew so fast, he could not stop when he saw a spider web in front of him. Stripey was trapped in the sticky web. With all his strength, he could not get out. "Help! Help!" Stripey cried. At that moment, one of his friends heard his cry and immediately flew away to tell the others. On hearing the news, a big bee said, "Oh, he is very strong. He will escape by himself." "That's right. He never needed us before," agreed the other bees. The bee who told the other bees the news said anxiously, "But he could not get out, so he cried for help. If we don't go, the evil spiders will eat him." "But if we go there, we might get caught in the web too, and the spiders are bigger than we are. We can't beat them." The whole group began to argue. "We must stick together," said the oldest bee. "He is a member of our family. We have to save him. Spiders are big and strong, but there are more of us. As long as we are together, we will definitely defeat them." Hearing this, the bee said, "Let's go! We have to save Stripey!" So the swarm of bees flew away, heading towards the forest where Stripey was trapped. At the web, the spiders were quickly crawling towards Stripey. Stripey lost hope and waited to die. Suddenly, he heard the familiar whirling sounds of his family. The whole swarm of bees was flying to save him. He was overjoyed. As Stripey watched the whole swarm fighting the spiders just to save him, he felt ashamed. They were braver than he was. When the spiders saw the hundreds of bees in the sky, they grew afraid and ran away. After being rescued by the entire swarm, Stripey stopped being so proud. Now, he happily works side by side with his friends. With his help, the bees continue to work hard, collecting huge amounts of nectar to make sweet honey.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears, written by Bella Watts. Once upon a time, there was a couple that longed to have a child. Finally, they had a beautiful baby girl. She had beautiful blonde hair, so they decided to name her Goldilocks. Goldilocks' parents loved her very much and took good care of her. But Goldilocks was naughty and did not obey them. She often teased her pet dog. One time, Goldilocks poured hot chili sauce into the soup her mother had just cooked. When Goldilocks' father ate the soup, it burned his mouth. Goldilocks' mother did not understand what had happened to the soup, while Goldilocks sat at the table laughing. That night, Goldilocks' mother asked, "Did you put the chili sauce in the soup?" Goldilocks answered, "No, I did not do anything. The chili went into the soup all by itself." Another time, Goldilocks found her grandmother's knitting on the table. Goldilocks unraveled the yarn and wrapped it around the chair. Grandma did not see Goldilocks, so she thought the dog had unraveled the yarn. Grandma shook her finger and said, "Bad dog." Goldilocks just laughed and added, "You should be a good dog. Then no one would scold you." One day, while her grandfather was sleeping on the couch, Goldilocks took the grandfather's glasses. When her grandfather woke up and had no glasses, the entire family had to search for them. Another day, Goldilocks used her mother's iron to press her doll clothes. However, she left the iron on, and it burned through the ironing board. Goldilocks' father knew what Goldilocks was doing and scolded her. He said, "Stop making trouble for everyone, Goldilocks." Goldilocks cried and pretended to be sorry. The next day, Goldilocks went outside to play. She chased a butterfly deep into the forest. In the forest, Goldilocks came across a cabin that belonged to a family of 3 bears. Goldilocks did not know this, so she went inside the cabin and found food on the table. Goldilocks was hungry, so she ate the soup. Then she found a small bed and took a nap. After a while, the bear family came home. The baby bear realized that someone had eaten his food. The bears found Goldilocks sleeping in the bed.
"Who are you? And what are you doing in our house?"
said the Papa Bear. Being afraid to say anything, Goldilocks got up and ran all the way home. Wanting to know why Goldilocks broke into their house, the bears followed her until she got home. Goldilocks told her mother what happened. Goldilocks' mother looked at the 3 bears and said, "We are sorry for our daughter taking your food. Please take this fruit basket as our sorry." The bear family accepted the basket and forgave Goldilocks. From then on, Goldilocks learned her lesson and promised to be a good girl. She and the baby bear became friends and had lots of fun together.
Black Cats Are Bad Luck, written by Mary Blake. One Monday, a kitten appeared at Bentley's house. Meow. It said. Bentley wanted to pet the kitten, but it ran away.
"There's a black kitten outside, Mom,"
said Bentley.
"Can we keep it?"
"Black cats are bad luck,"
said Mom. On Tuesday, the kitten was there again. Meow. It said, and rubbed against Bentley's leg.
"Mom, I saw that kitten again,"
said Bentley.
"I think it likes me."
Black cats are bad luck,
said Mom. On Wednesday, the kitten was still there. It said, Bentley squatted to pet the kitten. Back and forth it walked under Bentley's hand.
That kitten is still here, Mom,
said Bentley. On Thursday, the phone rang,
We haven't seen him.
said Mom.
I'm sorry.
It was Ms. Kathy, living down the street. Her little son Caden was missing. She could not find him anywhere. The kitten was still there, under some bushes by the house. It said,
Here, kitty.
said Bentley. The kitten didn't come. It said. Suddenly, Bentley heard a rustling in the bushes.
What was that?
He wondered nervously. He crept over, parted the branches, and peered in between. There, huddled behind the bushes, was Caden. He began to cry.
It's okay.
Said Bentley, taking Caden's hand and leading him out. Caden's mother came right away.
You're a hero!
She told Bentley.
You found Caden!
No,
Said Bentley.
the kitten found Caden. He's the hero. I think that's pretty lucky, Mom. Don't you?
I guess that is pretty lucky.
Said Mom. She stepped onto the porch and gently picked up the kitten.
He'll need a name.
She said. Meow, said the little black cat.
Meow will hardly do.
Said Bentley to the kitten.
Hero is a better name.
Said Hero the cat.
That morning, the stag came to his place to continue his work.
Somebody is helping me.
He said to himself, looking at his new place.
This place is now completely cleared and ready for me to build the foundation.
The stag began to work right away and continued all day. He only left at night when the foundation was laid. That night, the tiger came to work on his new house.
Somebody is helping me.
He said to himself, looking at his new place.
The foundation of my house has already been laid.
He began to work at once and built the sides of the house. He worked all night and left at daybreak, leaving the house with the sides completed. At daybreak, the stag came back to work on his house and could not believe his eyes. The sides of the house were finished with a big door and a funny little window.
Somebody must definitely be helping me.
He thought as he began to construct the roof. He worked hard all day, and when the sun went down, the roof of dried grass was finished.
Ah, I can sleep in my own house tonight.
He said with satisfaction. He made his bed in the corner and was soon sound asleep. That night, the tiger returned to the house, planning to continue his work. He could not believe his eyes. His house now had a roof of dried grass. The tiger rubbed his eyes, for he thought he was dreaming.
There must be somebody helping me.
the tiger said to himself. When he entered the house, the first thing he saw was a stag sleeping in the bed.
Who are you, and what are you doing in my house?
The tiger asked angrily. Annoyed at being woken up, the stag angrily shouted back.
This is my house! Who are you?
It is not your house. It is mine. I built it myself,
said the tiger.
No, this house is mine,
said the stag.
I built it myself.
I made the clearing for the house,
said the tiger.
I built the sides and made the door and window.
I started the clearing,
said the stag.
I laid the foundation and built the roof of dried grass.
Both the tiger and the stag were certain they owned the house. The two animals grew angrier and angrier until they were not only arguing, but physically fighting each other. The fight was so fierce that the house was soon torn down. How foolish they were! Now they both had no place to live in. If only the tiger and the stag had calmed down, their whole effort would not have been ruined, and they would have not hurt themselves.
The Old Rough Stone and the Gnarled Tree. On the top of a hill, there lay a single large rough stone. The stone really enjoyed his private space and did not want to share it with anyone else. One day, a tiny squirrel climbed up on the stone to nibble a nut. The stone became very angry.
That idiot squirrel! How dare he sit on me without asking my permission? For God's sake, if only I had legs to kick him off. If only I had a mouth to scold him. If only I weren't a stone.
Just then, a gaggle of geese flew over and honked loudly. The squirrel was startled. It ran away, left the nut on the ground right next to the stone.
Great!
Thought the stone.
Now that nut will take root and grow into a tree, and I will have to lie here for ages beneath.
One night, during a heavy storm, the old rough stone saw a burst of lightning, followed by a thunderous crash. Just then, he heard a loud crack. The stone had no idea what was happening. It was so dark that he could not see anything. Therefore, he went back to sleep. The next morning, he saw the gnarled tree lying on the ground. There was now only a dying root next to the stone. Seeing that, the stone was extremely glad.
Now I shall be all by myself again. There will be nothing that can interfere in my life anymore.
Then he looked at the tree trunk and said,
My goodness! Look how big it is! It must have been hundreds of years that I've had to live with that tree. And now, finally, I'm free!
A few days later, a man came with an axe, cut the tree trunk into pieces, and carried all of it away. Finally, the old rough stone could completely enjoy his privacy. However, when the hot summer days came, the sun beat down upon the old rough stone. Only now did he miss the shade of the gnarled tree.
My, it's hot!
Said the old rough stone.
I wish the gnarled tree with its pretty rustling leaves were here to shade me and keep me cool.
When it was winter time, the old rough stone missed the leaves that fell around him and kept him warm.
Oh dear, how cold it is!
Cried the stone.
I wish the gnarled tree would come back and scatter its leaves around me to protect me from the cold.
Years and years and years passed, and the great old rough stone lay all alone.
I wish another squirrel would come to eat nuts upon me,
he thought.
Then another nut might drop beside me again and grow into a lovely tree to keep me company.
However, many years went by, and never again did a tiny squirrel sit and eat nuts on the old rough stone. And never again did another tree grow above the old rough stone to keep him company. The old rough stone had to spend the rest of his life in loneliness and regret. Sighed the old rough stone.
We never know how well off we are until we lose something we really need.
Fortune and the Beggar. In a small old town, there was once a ragged beggar. He didn't have a house, not even a cottage to live in. He normally carried an old bag and crept along the street, asking people for a few cents to buy food. However, sometimes this didn't work, and he would have nothing to eat. Depressed about his life, the poor beggar grumbled a lot.
Why is my life so hard? I don't ask much, just some change to buy food for my empty stomach. No matter how hard I try, I am always hungry. What about rich people? Their desires are endless. They're always wanting more and more. They will never be satisfied until they gain the whole world. Oh, poor me. If only I had something to eat and to wear, I really would not want anything more,
thought the beggar, with his stomach rumbling continuously. Just
more.
Another coin was added, and the bag split wide open. When the treasure fell upon the ground and turned into dust, the fortune disappeared. As for the beggar, he now had nothing but his empty bag, which was torn from top to bottom. In bitter regret, the beggar said to himself,
My goodness, how foolish I was. I wish I had been able to stop my endless greed. I wish I had taken only what I needed, so at least I wouldn't have to be in such a tragic situation now. Oh, poor me. Oh, silly me.
From that time on, the beggar spent his life in poverty even worse than it had been before. Never again did he have the chance to get the gold back. Never again could he leave his miserable life.
The Cracked Pot. A water bear on one side of the path, and this cheered it some. But at the error for its failure. The bear then said to the cracked pot, "Did you notice that there were flowers on your side of the path? Every day when we've walked back to the house," written by Curtis Norris. Once there was a handsome young man called Francis. His family was poor, and one day his father said, "It's time for you to seek your fortune. All I can give you is this cat." So Francis left with the cat. Suddenly, the cat spoke. "I can help you make your fortune, but..."
Time came, and the monster was back again. But all he got were the rice roots that grew under the ground. The monster was angry. He said, "Next time, I want the roots and the leaves." Soon, the next harvest came, and the monster returned. The farmer said, "As promised, I only took the corn cobs. All the leaves, stalks, and roots are for you." Then the monster realized that the clever farmer had fooled him, but he could not do anything. Angry, the monster went far away and was never seen again.
The Wild Swans. Once upon a time, there lived a king and queen who had 11 sons and one daughter named Alyssa. They lived happily together until one day the queen died and the king remarried a wicked queen. She sent Alyssa to a remote village to live with a poor peasant and turned the 11 brothers into swans.
Fly out into the woods,
said the wicked queen.
Make sure that I would never see you again. If not, I would kill you all.
Poor Alyssa lived a lonely life without her brothers. As she grew into a lovely young woman, she went back to the palace to find her father and brothers. Right after seeing beautiful Alyssa, the wicked queen got jealous. The queen tried to cast spells on Alyssa, but Alyssa was so pure that all the spells had no effect on her. Then the queen put a dark ointment on Alyssa's skin, which made Alyssa very ugly, so that the king didn't recognize her.
"Someone has taken away my daughter,"
the king said.
"This is not her. Away with whomever this is."
Oh
no! Alyssa had to leave the palace. She went into the woods, hoping to find her brothers. She wandered around, eating wild apples and berries. Soon, she met a strange old woman.
Have you seen 11 princes anywhere in the woods?
Alyssa asked.
No, but I once saw 11 swans swimming in the lake at day, and by night they became young men,
replied the old woman. Alyssa hurried to the lake, hoping to find her brothers. There, she saw her face ugly in dark ointment. She washed her face and sat down to wait for the swans. As the sun set, Elissa saw 11 swans flying toward the lake. They landed near where Elissa was hiding. The sun went down and darkness fell. She saw the swans' feathers fall off, and 11 handsome princes stood in their places. Elissa cried out, running to her brothers. They were so happy to see each other again.
My dear brothers,
Elissa exclaimed.
I miss you all so much.
Elissa, how wonderful to see you.
One of the princes cried happily. They told Elissa all that had happened to them. They lived in a land across the lake, and it was time for them to go back. They persuaded Elissa to go with them.
Come with us. We can make a net to carry you across, and we can live together again.
One of the princes said to Elissa. She agreed to go. So the next night, the princes weaved a strong net. Then, in the following morning, Elissa was carried to a beautiful land with mountains, forests, and palaces.
Oh, wow!
The princes lived in a nice cave. Although Elissa was now reunited with her brothers, she still wanted to break the spell that had been cast on the princes. One night, Elissa had a strange dream in which a fairy appeared and told her,
You must weave 11 coats of nettles for your brothers, but you cannot speak until you finish everything. Otherwise, your brothers will be swans forever.
Elissa woke up and exclaimed,
Oh yes, I will do that.
Elissa knew that it would be hard and painful work since the nettles would sting and burn her hands. She started to make coats from the nettle, but couldn't tell the brothers what she was doing. Her hands became blistered and sore.
Out!
One day, a young king came along. He saw Elissa and fell in love with her at first sight. He said to Elissa, Come with me, you cannot live here. I will give you velvet and silk to wear. Elissa couldn't speak, so she could not refuse and say no. So the king put Elissa on his horse and galloped away to his lovely castle. His servants brought all the nettles and the coats. Soon, Elissa became the queen and dressed in beautiful clothes every day. But she wanted to finish the coats for her brothers, so she continued to work on them. However, she couldn't explain to the king why she was weaving. In time, the people thought that Elissa was practicing witchcraft. Since she couldn't speak to defend herself, they persuaded the king that her strange habit of gathering nettles and weaving coats was proof that she was a witch.
It's so strange what she is doing. She must be a witch,
one servant said to the king. But the king didn't believe. Elissa tried to finish the coats quickly. At last, she finished all but one sleeve for her youngest brother's coat. One night, Elissa ran out of nettles and was forced to collect more in a nearby church graveyard where a man was watching. He reported the incident to the king. Immediately, Elissa was brought to trial for witchcraft. She could speak no word in her defense and was sentenced to death by burning at the stake. When she was taken to be burned at the stake, she still weaved the very last coat. As she was brought forward, the 11 swans flew down to her. Hurriedly, she threw each coat over each swan. The swans immediately became princes again, although the youngest still had a swan's wing where there was no sleeve. Alyssa could speak now.
I am innocent,
she exclaimed. Then Alyssa fainted from exhaustion, so her brothers explained for everyone and the king. As they did so, the firewood around Alyssa's stake miraculously takes root and bursts into flowers. The king plucks the topmost flower and placed it in Alyssa's bosom. Suddenly, Alyssa awoke. The king said sorry to Alyssa for misunderstanding her and asked her if she wanted to be the queen again. With all happiness and peace in her soul, Alyssa agreed. Since then, Alyssa lived with the king and her 11 brothers in the castle, happily ever after.
Master of all masters. Once there was a girl who wanted to get a job. She went to a job fair to apply for a position as a servant. At last, an old gentleman hired her and led her to his house. The man lived alone in an isolated house. He believed his knowledge was so great that he always called things by complex names. On the first day of work, the man taught his new servant all these unusual names. He said to her,
"The first thing you need to know is, what will you call me?"
Master, Mister, or whatever you please, sir.
The servant answered,
"You must call me Master of all Masters,"
said the man. He pointed to his bed and asked,
"And what would you call this?"
A bed or couch or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"No, that's my barnacle." "What about these?"
he said, pointing to his pantaloons.
Breeches or trousers or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"You must call them squibs and crackers."
The master said,
"And what would you call her?"
asked he, pointing to his cat.
Cat or kitty or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"You must call her White-Faced Simony. Now this."
The master gestured to the fire.
"What would you call it?"
Fire or flame or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"You must call it Hot Cockalorum. And what about this?"
The master went on, pointing to the water.
Water or wet or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"No, Pondalorum is its name. And what do you call this?"
the master asked, pointing to the house.
House or cottage or whatever you please, sir.
She answered,
"No, you must call it High Topper Mountain."
replied the master. The servant listened and carefully wrote down everything her master said. Unluckily, that night, a fire suddenly broke out. The servant woke her master in a fright and cried,
Master of all masters, get out of your barnacle and put on your squids and crackers. For white-faced Simony has got a spark of hot cockalorum on its tail. And unless you get some pondalorum, High Topper Mountain will be all on hot cockalorum.
Because these names were so long and complex, it took the servant a while to finish what she was saying. But the fire spread so quickly that by then it was too late. The master and servant only escaped death by inches and had to watch their house burn to the ground. What a shame! If only the man had not complicated matters, he and the servant could have stopped the fire and saved the house.
The Three Feathers. Once there was a king who had 3 sons. The 2 older sons were clever and proud, but the youngest son was humble and kind. As the king grew old and tired, one day he called his sons together and said,
My dear sons, I do not have long to live, and one of you will become king when I am gone. Therefore, I will send you all out on a quest to find a carpet. Whoever brings me the finest one will be my successor.
The 2 older sons thought it would surely be one of them. They did not think that their younger brother was smart enough to do anything right. The king said,
To begin the quest, I will throw 3 feathers into the air. You will start your search in whatever direction your feather falls.
The king threw the feather in the air for the oldest son. It drifted to the east. The feather for the second son fell towards the west. But the younger son's feather fell to the ground near a trap door. Immediately, the 2 older sons set off on their search. The oldest prince met a peddler selling carpets and demanded that the peddler unload the goods for him to see.
Okay.
The prince quickly looked through the carpets and chose the one he thought was the most beautiful. Then the peddler rolled the carpet up and put it on the prince's horse. As the oldest prince was about to ride off, the peddler asked for the money for his carpet. The prince looked down on the peddler and said,
Do you know who I am? I am the king's son, and I don't have to pay you anything.
With that, the prince quickly rode off to the palace. The second son went west to a carpet maker's shop. He looked at all the beautiful carpets and chose the one he thought was the best. When it came time to pay the money for the carpet, the second oldest prince threw a few coins on the ground, grabbed the carpet, and left. The youngest son was still at home and felt very sad. Where was he to go to get a carpet? Then he noticed the trap door near the spot where the third feather had landed. he decided to open the door and go down the stairs to a basement. He saw a huge green door in the basement. He knocked, and a big frog opened the door.
"What do you want?"
The frog croaked.
Do you happen to have any carpets?
The youngest son asked.
My father is the king, and he has sent me to find the most beautiful carpet in the land.
"Come and see,"
said the frog. The youngest son found himself in a room filled with frogs. They asked him to help them dig a hole in the ground to build a lily pond. The young prince did without complaining. Then, when the prince finished digging, he said to the frogs,
I have to go now to try and find a carpet.
But the chief frog said to the prince,
"Because you have been so kind to us, we'll give you a carpet."
The frogs gave the prince a parcel in which a carpet was packed and told him not to open it until he showed it to his father. The prince thanked the frogs and returned to the king. All three princes showed their carpets to the king. When the youngest son unrolled his carpet, it was the most beautiful of all. The older brothers were very angry because they did not want the youngest to rule the kingdom. They asked the king to give them another challenge.
All right,
The king agreed.
whoever brings me the most beautiful ring will inherit my kingdom.
Again, the king threw 3 feathers into the air to direct his sons on their quest. 1 feather flew east, 1 flew west, and the 3rd feather fell on the ground by the trap door. The older sons were more determined than ever that one of them should rule the kingdom.
He won't be so lucky this time,
the oldest prince said to the second one. Back to the basement, the youngest prince told the frogs about the ring. The frogs promised to help the prince if he could remove a big rock that was keeping the water from flowing into the lily pond. The prince gladly did so, although it was a hard work. After the youngest prince had finished, the frogs gave him a little box with a ring. Again, he was told not to open the box until he met the king. The prince thanked the frogs and took the ring back to his father. When the sons presented their rings to the king, the older sons were enraged when they saw that youngest son had the most beautiful ring.
This can't be right.
The second prince cried.
Our younger brother isn't fit to rule. We are smarter than he is. We demand another test.
Reluctantly, the king agreed.
Then go and bring me the most beautiful woman in the kingdom,
the king said to the princes. Again, the king threw out the feathers. 1 flew east, 1 flew west, and 1 fell by the trap door. The other 2 brothers dashed off. They were in such a hurry to get back and be chosen to rule the kingdom. So, They each grabbed the first beautiful woman they saw, even when the woman did not want to come with them. Meanwhile, the youngest son knocked on the frog's door again and told them what he needed.
This time, the king wants me to bring him the most beautiful woman in the kingdom,
the youngest prince said. The chief frog thought for a moment.
This is not easy task, but because you have been so good to us, we'll help you.
The chief frog then called a tiny frog out and spoke some magic words. Immediately, the little frog turned into a lady of great beauty. The youngest son was so glad. He thanked the frog and quickly took the beautiful lady back to see the king. The king and the older brothers were amazed at the beauty of the woman coming with the youngest prince. Everyone said she was the most beautiful woman they had ever seen. The king was very delighted. He declared,
"No more contests. When I die, my youngest son will rule the kingdom."
The two older brothers gave up their desires to be the next successor of the king and happily admitted the result. Regarding the youngest prince, thanks to his kindness, he married the most beautiful woman and later on be the next ruler of the kingdom. He had taught his two older brothers a lesson that one kindness deserved another.
The Snow Queen. Once upon a time, in Lapland, the Snow Queen lived in a mountain-top castle covered with ice and snow. She had a magic mirror that made everything appear to be the opposite of what it really was. Things that were beautiful looked ugly in the mirror, and things that were good looked bad. That made the Snow Queen very happy. One day, the magic mirror broke into 1,000,000 pieces. They fell and landed all over the earth. Some pieces landed in a small village where Kay and Gerda lived. Kay and Gerda were friends. That day, when they were playing, a piece of the broken mirror fell and hit Kay in his eye, and another piece fell into his heart. It changed his views about everything. Instead of being nice to Gerda, Kay made fun of her and would hit her every time he could. Gerda did not know what had happened. She had no idea why Kay was acting so strangely, but she still wanted to be friends with him. One day, Kay and some other children decided to go on a sleigh ride through the snow. Gerda wanted to come too. However, Kay and his new friends ran so fast that Gerda could not keep up with them. Before long, they were deep into the woods. Gerda could no longer see Kay and his friends, and she decided to go home. As Kay and his friends came into the clearing, a big sleigh pulled by a team of reindeer appeared.
"Step inside,"
the driver invited Kay. The driver then lifted her hood. She was a woman whose face sparkled as bright as a diamond.
"Who are you?"
Kay asked in amazement.
"I am the Snow Queen."
the sparkling woman replied.
And now I will take you to my kingdom.
Before Kay could reply, the Snow Queen pulled on the reins, and the sleigh and the reindeer flew up into the sky. They rode higher and higher. The sleigh soared high over clouds and into a distant land. Some days passed, but Gerda didn't see Kay come back. She wondered what had happened to him. She looked everywhere but could not find him. Gerda even searched the forest, where she met a talking reindeer.
Have you seen Kay?
Gerda asked tearfully.
Yes, I have,
said the reindeer.
The Snow Queen took him away on her sleigh to Lapland.
Where is that?
Gerda asked.
A country far to the north,
the reindeer said.
I can take you there if you want, and we can search for him.
Gerda agreed, and they began their journey. Many days passed. They traveled through forests, meadows, and over mountains. Finally, they arrived in Lapland. When Gerda and the reindeer got there, they met a witch.
Have you seen the Snow Queen and a boy?
Gerda asked.
Yes,
the witch replied.
The Snow Queen took the boy to her castle. Since he has glass from the magic mirror inside of him, it is probably best that he stays there for now. The Snow Queen's castle is cold and dark. It is made entirely out of ice. What is a magic mirror?
Gerda asked. The witch explained how the Snow Queen had made it, and when it broke, its magic spread wherever the pieces landed.
Oh no, my poor friend. Please, show me the way to the castle. I must see him,
Gerda told the witch. Meanwhile, the Snow Queen had a challenge for Kay.
If you can spell the word eternity from letters made of ice, I will let you go.
Kay tried again and again, but he could not spell eternity from the ice letters. He was about to give up when he saw Gerda entering the castle. Gerda cried out with joy and hugged Kay. Her warm tears fell on him, and his cold heart began to melt, destroying the magic of the Snow Queen's mirror. Kay also started to weep. When Gerda and Kay's warm tears fell on the ice letters, they magically moved and spelled out the word eternity. Once that happened, the Snow Queen let Kay go. Kay returned home with Gerda. They remained good friends for their entire lives.
The King Midas and the Golden Touch. Many years ago, there was a rich king named Midas. The king grew so fond of gold, better than anything else in the whole world. One day, while he was in his gold room, a fairy boy appeared in front of him. The fairy's face shone with a wonderful light, and he had wings on his back.
King Midas, you are the richest man in the world,
said the fairy boy. There is no king who has as much gold as you do.
Of course I have the most gold in the world,
boasted the king.
but I want much more, for gold is the best and the most wonderful thing in the world.
Are you sure? asked the fairy boy.
I am very sure,
answered the king. If I should grant you one wish, said the fairy boy, would you ask for more gold?
If I could have one wish,
said the king,
I would ask that everything I touch should turn into beautiful yellow gold.
Your wish shall be granted, said the fairy boy. At sunrise tomorrow morning, your slightest touch will turn everything into gold. But I warn you that your gift will not make you happy.
I will take the risk,
said the king. The next day, King Midas awoke very early. He wanted to see if the fairy's promise had come true. As soon as the sun arose, he tried the gift by touching the bed lightly with his hand. The bed turned into gold. He touched the chair and table. Instantly, they changed into solid gold. The king was wild with joy. He ran around the room, touching everything he could see. His magic gift turned everything he touched into shining yellow gold. The king was hungry, and he went down to eat his breakfast. But when he lifted a glass of clear, cold water to drink, it became solid gold. Not a drop of water could pass his lips. The bread turned to gold under his fingers. The meat was hard, yellow, and shiny. The king was not able to eat anything. Everything he touched was gold, gold, and gold. The king's little daughter came in from the garden. Without thinking, the king gently kissed her. At once, the little girl transformed into a golden statue. A great fear crept into King Midas's heart, sweeping all the joy out of his life. In his grief, the king called out loudly for the fairy who had given him the gift of the golden touch.
Help! Help! Oh, fairy,
he begged.
Please take away this horrible golden gift. Take all my lands. Take all my gold. Take everything. Only give me back my little daughter.
In a moment, the fairy boy appeared and asked, "Do you still think that gold is the greatest thing in the world?"
No, no,
cried the king.
I can't stand the sight of the golden stuff.
Are you sure that you no longer wish for the golden touch? asked the fairy.
I have learned my lesson,
said the king.
I no longer think that gold is the greatest thing in the world.
Very well, said the fairy. Take this pitcher to the spring in the garden and fill it with water. Then sprinkle the things you have touched. Midas took the pitcher and rushed to the spring. As soon as he returned, he sprinkled his dear little girl. instantly she became his own sweet daughter again and gave him a kiss. The king sprinkled his food, and to his great joy, it turned back to real bread and butter. Then the king and his little daughter sat down to have breakfast. How good the cold water tasted! How eagerly the hungry king ate the good food! Ever since then, King Midas became a better king, generous and grateful for all goods in his life.
The Goose Girl. Once upon a time, there was a princess named Annie. Annie loved to ride in the fields upon her horse, Falada. Falada could talk, so Annie and Falada would speak together. One day, Annie's father, the king, fell off his horse while he was out riding and died. The queen had only her daughter now. Soon, it became time for Annie to go to the next country to marry the prince who lived there. The queen gave Annie a handkerchief and said,
"Keep this handkerchief with you at all times. It will protect you against all evil."
"Thank you, Mother,"
said Annie. The queen bid her goodbye, and Annie and her maid set out. Annie rode her special horse, Falada, and the maid rode a pony. In time, they came to a brook, and the princess wanted a drink of water.
"I am thirsty. Please bring me some water,"
Annie asked her maid. The maid was rude and refused the princess's demand.
"No, I will not. If you are thirsty, get down yourself and go down to the water. I will not be your maid anymore,"
the maid replied. The princess was so thirsty that she got down off her horse, knelt over the brook, and drank water. As she did so, the handkerchief fell into the water and drifted away.
"Oh no!"
The maid saw it and knew that the princess was no longer protected. The maid insisted that she ride Falada and the princess would ride the pony. She made the princess wear her maid's clothes, and she wore the princess's royal clothes.
"Aha! Now you will do what I say. Give me your horse to ride, and you will have my pony. Give me your clothes to wear, and you will have mine,"
the maid said. Then the maid threatened.
"Do not tell anyone what has happened."
Annie had to promise. They entered the neighboring kingdom and were greeted with great joy by the prince. The prince married the maid, and the real princess was sent to work with a goose boy. The maid was afraid that the horse Falada might tell someone the truth, so she talked to the prince.
"Kill Falada, the horse. He caused a lot of trouble on the way."
Annie heard that Falada would be killed. She begged the goose boy, who had been ordered to kill Falada, to find a way to save it. The goose boy took pity on Annie So he agreed. He brought Falada to a barn. Every day, Annie passed by to visit and talk to Falada. The goose boy was often nearby and heard their story. One day, the goose boy told the king everything he'd heard them say. The king realized that Annie was the real princess. The maid was sentenced to death for her lies and treachery. Then the real princess, Annie, became the prince's wife, and they lived happily ever after.